This is the UV box project that we're building. Here you can see it's built in a Pelican case with the timer on the top to allow you to control the dosing. And on the inside we've got 4 UVC light tubes, 2 ballasts, a safety switch, and the wiring. The complete bill of materials is available on the website for download, and here you can see it all in one place. We also have the complete list of tools and materials that are used to construct the UVC box, all fairly simple tools that most people have available right at home. The first step is to prepare the inside of the Pelican case to allow the paint to adhere. So here you can see I'm sanding it with a palm sander just to scuff up the surface using 150 grit sandpaper. Some of the corners are a little hard to get into with the palm sander, so I'm doing those by hand. After it's all sanded, grab a rag, put a little denatured alcohol on it or paint thinner, and wipe the entire inside of the box to remove any remaining sanding dust. Now the next step here is to flame treat the inside of the Pelican case. This is to allow the paint to adhere even better. Make sure that you let the denatured alcohol completely dry before you do this. And as you can see, I'm just using a torch, and the important part here is that the flame touch the material. And you can move fairly quickly. This video is not sped up at all. And you want to make sure that the flame touches every part of the inside of the case, so that everything has been touched by flame. But be careful not to overheat it or allow it to melt. The goal is not heat, it's just to have flame touching the material. All done, ready for paint. Now I found this Lumicept paint to be pretty thick stuff, so in order to make it easier to apply to the inside of the box with my brush, I thinned it out. You can thin the paint with water and just add enough water to the paint in a separate container until it reaches the consistency of something like cream or heavy cream. Once you get your paint thinned correctly, you can go ahead and start painting the inside of the case with an ordinary bristle brush. It's important to work the paint into all the corners and do the whole thing. Here you can see I've added painter's tape to keep paint from getting into the lip in between the lid of the case and the lower part of the case. So we're just coating everything here with paint, again working it into the corners. It takes a few coats to get this done, and so I used a fan in between coats to help the paint dry a little bit faster. And in my case, when I did this, I used 5 coats of paint to fully cover the inside of the case. And you can see here as we have more coats, it gets to be a nice pure white color. And then finally, after the paint's dry, you can remove the painter's tape and see the nice clean edges that you get there, and that will allow the case to continue to close and seal easily, and it makes your work look nice. Now that the paint is complete, you're ready to install the ballast and the light tubes. The first step to doing that is to remove the carrying handle on the back of the Pelican case. It's easy to do, just take out these bolts and the handle will come right off. Once you have the handle off, you can go ahead and install the ballasts. The first one goes on the top inside of the lid like this. I basically just put it near the middle. It wasn't very precise. I used rivets in my case to install them, but you can also use bolts if you'd prefer. And then once they're both in, you can see both installed here, you're ready to start with the light tubes themselves. Now you're ready to install the tombstones, and what I did is to space them equally across the width of the case in both directions, and so they're evenly spaced in this direction and evenly spaced side to side. It's about 5.5 inches from the top and the bottom. And now I'm starting to install them here in the lower part of the case, and you can see I made a spacer that's 17 3/8 of an inch long, and I'm using that spacer to set the gap between the tombstones. And then I can put them as I want to place them in the bottom of the case, both side to side and widthwise, just evenly spacing them out. Once I have them where I want them, I'm going to drill some holes through the case, and then from the back side of the case we're going to countersink those holes to account for the countersunk hardware that we're using. And then we'll use nuts and washers on the top in order to secure them into position. And here on the back you can see the bolts countersunk. To wire this up, we're going to use these wires off the ballast. The red wire will be run up under the ballast like this, and will be used to attach to the tombstones over on the right side here. And it's important that this one red wire goes to all 4 of the wires from the tombstones. These tombstones need to be used in what's called a shunted mode, which means that the 2 wires from the tombstones are connected together, and then they're connected to the red wire. And we do the same thing with the tombstones, with the wires from the other tombstone. And on the other side, we're going to be connecting the blue wires to the tombstones. And we only need 2 of them, so one of them is going to be clipped off. So we use 1 for each tombstone and 1 for each tube, and we don't have a 3rd tube, so we only need 2 wires. Now in this case, one of the blue wires is going to be connected to the 2 wires from one of the tombstones, and the other blue wire is going to be connected to the 2 wires from the other tombstone, again used in shunted mode. And do the same thing on the top. Now, strip the wires, we'll use wire nuts to connect them together, and connect all those wires up the way I just described. You want to try and make it neat, because then you can use the wire conduit to cover the wires. You can hide the wire nuts inside the conduit if you want, and here's what it can look like when it's all done. So the conduit's in place, the wiring's in place, the wire nuts are there, and you do the same thing on the bottom, and then you do it again on the top. So once you have it all wired up, we'll go ahead and later prepare these for paint so that we have UV paint all over the inside. So that's how you wire up the tubes, and the next thing that we'll do is wire the power to the ballasts. This is the box that's used for the timer. Drill some holes, install the box on the top. To install the safety switch, the first thing I did was just attach it with one single bolt, drilled through from the back and countersunk just like we did with the tombstones. Now I set the switch in a location 0.15 inches between the top of the switch and the upper lip of the case. And I only put 1 bolt in because now I'm able to move the switch up and down a little bit so that I can adjust so that that roller hitting the ballast above ends up in the right position for the switch to turn on and off when the box is opened and closed. So now that we have it in our test position, I hooked some wires up to the bottom of the switch, and I hooked it up to my continuity tester. And I just closed the door, and you can see that I have good continuity. And then when I open the door, the continuity stops, so I know I have the switch in a good location. Now put the second bolt into the safety switch, and we'll move on to wiring the power to the ballasts. Now I've hooked up the piece of lamp cord here to my first ballast, attached it with some wire nuts. Again, I used the crimp-on ones. You can use the screw-on ones if you prefer them. And when you do this, make sure you know which wire is the black one and which one is the white one. And also put one of the cable ties, the adhesive cable ties here on the ballast, just to relieve any strain, because this piece of wire moves as the lid opens and closes, and you don't want to be constantly flexing the wire nuts where the wires are connected together up here. Very important point. Now, I took the black wire from the top ballast, and again, I know which one that is through my lamp cord, the black wire from my bottom ballast, and I connected them together on this little ring terminal. And I'm going to connect that to my switch. Now the other one, the white one, I just let that continue through, so I just cut the wire on only one side so that I could connect my ring terminal here. And then I put a ring terminal on the other side, which would be the continuation of the black wire, and those are going to go onto the screw terminals on the bottom of the safety switch. It's important to hook things up to the correct terminals. On the bottom of the switch, you'll notice a common, normally open, and normally closed terminals. We'll be using common and normally open only. So go ahead and connect your wires to those terminals like I've done here. And you can also notice that I removed the screw from the terminal that we're not using. That's just to reduce the area of live electrical inside here so no one gets shocked. Finally, wrap the switch in electrical tape to cover everything up and go ahead and reattach it to the bolts that you installed for the case. And this is what it should look like when it's done. Now it's time to install the timer and the power cord. And here you can see the timer, and you can see that I've pulled the wires through the case, the lamp cord and the white wire from the other ballast. And we're going to hook this up to our power cord. And here on the power cord you can see 3 wires, a green one which is a ground, a black one which is the hot lead, and a white one which is the neutral lead. And so the white wires will all be connected together. And so we're going to connect the white wire from the ballasts. And remember, we talked earlier about making sure we know which one of these 2 wires is white and which is black. So we need the white wire from the ballasts. We need the white wire from the lower ballast and the white wire from the power cord. We're going to connect all 3 of those together inside a twist-on wire nut, one of the orange wire nuts. And then we also go ahead and connect the ground to the ground coming from the timer itself. And when that's done, it'll look like this. So here's the white wires all connected together, the ground connected, and the timer. The next step is to hook up the hot leads. And on the timer, you'll notice it says line 1 and load 1. And those are the 2 terminals that we're going to use on the timer to bring power into the box. The line 1 terminal is for the line or the power cord, and the load 1 is for the load or the light ballasts themselves. So we'll go ahead and hook those underneath the terminals. Just using the screwdriver, they slide in from the side and they get clamped underneath the screws. And this is what it looks like when it's done. There's the power cord going into line 1, and then there's at the bottom there's the black wire coming from the ballasts going into load 1, and the timer's wired. So now we've got our power wiring done. Here are the 3 commons connected, or the 3 neutral lines connected together. We have the grounds connected, and we have the hot or black wires connected. The next step is to bring this into the junction box that we're using here. You'll notice with the box that it comes with a little tie wrap, and that little tie wrap is used to connect to the power cord itself, so that if that cord gets pulled on from the outside, it doesn't place strain directly on our terminal connections themselves. So go ahead and wrap the tie wrap around, install the box, screw the timer into the box, and you now have the power wiring completed. Now it's time to make sure that we have UV reflective paint on everything inside the box. And so the things that weren't painted are the ballasts and the wire conduit. So I'm using some 150 grit sandpaper just to scuff those up. I'll do that by hand, and then we get the Lumicept paint and paint everything that wasn't painted previously. And you can also use this time to fix any small blemishes that may have occurred in the original painting. We want to make sure that anybody around this box when it's in operation knows it contains UV light, and so just clean it up with the denatured alcohol and install the UV sticker that you found through the bill of materials. Now comes the fun part. Let's go ahead and put the UV light tubes into our tombstones and install all 4 of them into the box. And once we get them installed, we can go ahead and plug the box in and turn it on. And you can see that there's UV light there, and we can also see that the safety switch is doing its job. And that's what it looks like on the inside. Okay, now it's time to figure out what dosage of UVC lighting we can produce with this box. I've installed the UVC dosimeter card in the box, and I'm using multiple cards and running the lights for different periods of time. And here in this case, you can see the card has turned pink, indicating the full 100 millijoules per square centimeter that the card can record. Here's my 30-second results, my 1-minute results, and my 2-minute results. And you can see that after 1 minute, we get 100 millijoules per square centimeter of UVC radiation. So you can now multiply by however much time you need to get the dose you desire. Well, if you've made it this far, congratulations. You've built your own UVC light box and you know how to determine the dose it can provide. So enjoy.